and welcome again to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is December 13th, and we have an article for you today entitled, The Bright Past and Future of Streetlights. Now, I bet this is something that a lot of us don't really think much about.
I agree. This is one of those things that most of us take for granted in the world. I bet you there are people that spend much of their careers and lives thinking about street lighting. But when I do hear people,
you're not one of them.
In some ways I am,
okay.
Because here's something that I often kind of laugh about personally. People often romanticize the past, and they often say, wouldn't it be great to go to some given time in the past? And almost universally, I'm like, no, that's a terrible idea. Our modern world is wonderful, including having actual lights to do things at night.
Exactly. And as regards streetlights, there are two occasions that make me think about them a lot. Number one is sometimes I hike at a late hour.
Okay.
It's already starting to get dark. So if you go out like in a graveyard or somewhere else, I go through a graveyard on one of my hikes. But actually, it's one of the really nice hikes for evening because they have a lot of streetlights. The whole path is illuminated.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that until light is taken away from you, you really do take it for granted about how convenient and how much better it makes our lives overall. I will say going to a place without any lights whatsoever is a very nice experience sometimes where you get to see the Milky Way or stars.
To see the stars, yeah.
That's right. But on the average day, I appreciate my streetlights.
I have another situation where I really, really care about streetlights, and I have often missed them, and that is on my way home if I'm driving.
Okay.
I live up on a mountain. Okay, you say mountain, it sounds really high. Maybe we can call it a hill. But we have to go uphill, and we have a very windy road. It winds this way and that way. You have to go around the humps in the hill. And sometimes the lights in the middle section at night when it's raining are not on.
Wow.
That makes it really dangerous to drive.
I agree, and especially people tend to be very confident while driving on mountain roads. It's probably best to slow down, especially if lighting is poor.
That's right, and sometimes the people around me, they just whoosh past. They're so impatient that I'm going slower. Man, I want to be in one piece when I get home, and in the car, I would like the car to be in one piece as well. They don't seem to mind, and I think, are your eyes that good? I mean, there are no lights tonight.
Yeah, I think so. Driving at night is trickier, especially in mountainous roads.
In the
rain. Yes, I agree. All these factors are really troublesome. I'm thinking about the various kinds of streetlights. I went on a very long drive in the United States a few months ago, and I'm thinking of the various lights that I went through. And it's not exciting to talk about here, but I'm just thinking like that certain lights really make driving a lot easier, where some just like, why do we even have this light? It's almost better than no light.
What situation would that be?
So I was driving through a lot of rural roads. I was driving through this middle of the United States, driving south, and there were long stretches of nothing. And the lights were very yellow, where it made it a little difficult to discern, to tell apart what I was doing and where I was going, other than just driving in a straight line. I think if I had to make any immediate decisions, there's an animal in the road or something happens, I probably would have had a harder time reacting accurately versus when I was approaching a city, a larger city, and the lights were much brighter. They were not a white color, but they were less kind of an oppressive yellow color. And it made my ability to see clearly that much more easier. And I feel I would have been better prepared. I certainly felt more awake too. I realized because I was doing this overnight drive, those brighter, whiter lights allowed me to pay attention better than those long kind of dull yellows.
That's true. That light really affects our state of wakefulness. So some people say that if they get up in the night, like to go to the bathroom, they do not want to turn on a light because they'll have trouble falling asleep again. So lights and wakefulness are closely related. And when driving, you've got the safety factor in. Although even at home, not turning on the lights, there was a guy who said he didn't want to get woken up. So he didn't turn on the lights, and then he tripped and fell and ended up with multiple fractures.
No. I have just a little light. It's a tiny little light bulb that's very yellow, and I just click it on when I'm in the bathroom at night. It's a tiny light, and it's perfect. It's just enough so you don't wake up. It's also very yellow, not unlike those street lights in the United States.
So it doesn't wake you up too much.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So the point of all this chatter at the beginning of the lesson is lights are really, really important, especially as regards safety. So appreciate them more. And one way we can appreciate them more, I think, is by understanding a bit more about their history. That's what we're going to talk about today. Our title is The Bright Past and Future of Streetlights. Streetlights are often taken for granted until a power outage plunges the world into darkness. When that happens, the value of these lighting installations becomes evident as the world turns into a more dangerous place for pedestrians and motorists alike.
The Chinese could claim to be the first to have constructed a crude type of streetlight. Around 500 BC, residents of Beijing employed a type of street lamp that used hollow bamboo pipes and natural gas vents to create burning torches. Later, ancient Romans adopted lamps fueled by vegetable oil, which relied on slaves to light and extinguish them as needed.
The first public street lighting campaign began in 1417 when the mayor of London issued an order to hang lanterns outside homes during the winter months. This early initiative to illuminate the streets marked the beginning of organized public street lighting, a concept that would transform cities across the world.
Fast forward 4 centuries to the 1800s when Baltimore became the first American city to install gas streetlights on poles. This was a significant leap forward in urban lighting, which replaced the more primitive methods of the past. In 1878, Paris began using the first electric streetlights, arc lamps. However, the harshness of the arc lamps proved to be unbearable to the public. Although thousands were installed in Paris and across the U.S., their popularity was short-lived.
The invention of the incandescent light bulb in 1879 quickly led to the replacement of the arc lamp. It offered a softer, more pleasant light and became the new standard. The evolution of urban lighting didn't stop there. From the 1960s to the early 21st century, sodium lamps became predominant. More recently, LED streetlights, with their superior energy efficiency, have replaced many high-pressure sodium lamps. As technology continues to advance, even more efficient streetlights are likely to provide a brighter future for nighttime pedestrians and drivers. Let's go back to the beginning. Our title is The Bright Past and Future of Streetlights. So you can say streetlights. In the past, people said street lamps. And it has a past and a future. And it was really bright. Like the arc lamps that we talked about, they were really, really bright. So the past was bright. And the future is bright in a metaphorical sense. That means we're looking forward to even better things in the future. So the bright past and future of streetlights. Our first sentence, streetlights are often taken for granted until a power outage plunges the world into darkness. This has a lot of good stuff in it. First of all, to be taken for granted. And that's something we all really hate. For example, our partners sometimes take us for granted that our wife will be home and she will be doing the cooking and the cleaning and the childcare. Well, I work, and of course, I work really hard, so you should do that. Oh, I feel like I'm being taken for granted. You don't appreciate all the work I do.
That's exactly right. So you don't appreciate something that you have that's very valuable, and when you lose that, it really hurts. A power outage happens somewhat frequently on my street. For some reason, a tiny section goes out really regularly, and it faces a mountain. So when this tiny strip goes out, it's really dark leading up the mountain behind me. And I will tell you, I am sure the people that live in that tiny section really do not take it for granted because when those lights go out, it looks like nothing exists back there.
Okay, years ago where I live, we had frequent power outages and frequent water stoppages. And if you have been through a lot of these, man, you really appreciate having both.
You really do. Would you rather take lights or running water in your house?
Water.
Water.
I know that immediately from this experience. Water is more important. You can live without electricity, no problem. You cannot live without water.
Toilet, flushing toilet, or running water?
Running water.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Toilet's a big one.
I need to drink.
Yeah.
If the toilet is working fine, but there's no drinking water, come on.
I gotta think about it.
You can always use a bucket. You can always use a bucket, right. But if you have no
source... And then clean it out with your running water? Okay.
No, you just wait until the water's back.
Okay.
Yeah, or you can bury it or something.
No. Okay, I'm with you on this. But if we're talking temporary, running water for sure.
Absolutely.
If we're talking permanent, still running water.
If you
no
have
washing
an
dishes,
outhouse,
that's annoying.
A lot of people still use an outhouse. It's doable.
Yeah, running water is a real big one. I agree. Okay.
All right, so that's the first sentence, that we often take these things for granted until we lose them. So learn to be more appreciative of the things you have. I think the older I get, the more appreciative I am of everything in my life. The first thing is when I wake up in the morning, I think, I have one more day in Taiwan in this wonderful place. God, I'm so lucky. I'm so happy to be here. I think that every morning. Don't think I'm goofy. Another thing I think about is death. I know I'm going to die. I have one more chance at life today. Man, I'm going to try to make the best of it. I think those things every day. Okay, not to say that, I'm, so good for doing it, but I remember to be thankful. I think everybody should be.
Don't take it for granted.
That's right. To plunge the world into darkness, this is a really great phrase. Plunge means to jump into the water, and then you make usually a big noise. So to plunge, it means it happens suddenly, and it just covers a very large area. All right, when that happens, the value of these lighting installations becomes evident as the world turns into a more dangerous place for pedestrians and motorists alike. I've already given a clear example of that, like when I was driving home at night in the rain, in the mountains, without lights. It is so dangerous. I don't care how good your lights are. So when you have that experience, you will really, really value the lighting installations that we have, the street lights that we have.
When we have a series of lights designed to focus light on an area so you can see more clearly or so that you can perform an activity, those are called lighting installations. This is a rather specific way of saying it because you can have lights that aren't really doing anything in particular. Your Christmas lights might look pretty, but if they're just hanging in your window, they're not really functional other than just being cute. A lighting installation is making sure you could do something with this area.
Right. Okay. And pedestrians and motorists, these are both good words to know. If you are walking on foot, I don't know how else you can walk, but normally if you're walking on foot, you are a pedestrian. Ped is the Latin word for foot. Also, Greek has a similar word. And motorists, all right, in British English, they often say motor cars instead of cars. We just say cars. Automobiles is not used so often. But for the person driving, we will say motorists.
All right, let's go to our next paragraph here. The Chinese could claim to be the first to have constructed a crude type of street light.
Now, that's kind of a negative word, a crude type, but it just means it was a beta kind of design. It was something that they had just invented. So, of course, it's not going to be really advanced.
I wrote the word rudimentary.
Good.
Because I feel it has a little bit of that less negative connotation here. Although it feels negative, it could just mean simple or basic. It doesn't necessarily have to be negative here, but it does feel like this is not advanced technology.
Right. And the word constructed is just another word for made, to have made a crude type, etc. And to claim to be the first, that means maybe you weren't the first, but as far as we know, it's probably them.
All right, let's move on to our next sentence here. Around 500 BC or BCE, residents of Beijing employed a type of street lamp that used hollow bamboo pipes and natural gas vents to create burning torches.
Now, I have to ask, why did you say Beijing instead of Beijing?
Well, because we're trying to do an English-only article.
Right.
So I use the American pronunciation of Beijing, although I probably haven't said that naturally in a long time.
It takes an effort because we know the right way to say it. The BBC says Beijing.
Yeah.
And you hear it everywhere in America. My sister says it, and she's got a Chinese daughter-in-law. So she's got plenty of Okay, her two sons both speak Chinese, so she could know better, but it's just used in the U.S. But we do that when we see the letter J in a foreign word. There's another common word that's really funny. A very famous building in India is called...
Oh, the Taj Mahal.
It should be the Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
But nobody will believe it because we think it's foreign. It has to be fancy, and they say Taj. But in Hindi, it's Taj. Beijing and Taj. I can't say they irritate me. I've gotten used to them. But I think you should really get it right.
Yeah, the Taj Mahal is that's a good point. I've never even considered that one, although I knew it, that the foreign J here is that zh sound.
That's right.
Beijing, yeah. I tell my students when we teach Beijing, like, just in class, I want you to practice it. But once you're outside of my classroom, I don't care what you say. I just want you to be aware you might hear it this way, and here's why.
And don't go crazy over it.
A vent is an opening that allows air to move into or out of a confined space.
And to make it into a fancy long noun, we have ventilation. That means how air is circulated throughout a building or a room. And hollow bamboo pipes, when I see that, I immediately think of music because there are a lot of instruments that use hollow bamboo pipes to make beautiful sounds. And natural gas, that means the gas is coming straight out of the earth.
All right, let's move on. Later, ancient Romans adopted lamps fueled by vegetable oil, which relied on slaves to light and extinguish them as needed.
Oh, slaves were really useful, and they had them in ancient China as well.
Yeah, slaves were everywhere. In Rome, generally, you were a war captive, you were a debt slave, or you were a criminal, or even a voluntary slave because at least as a slave got food. And you might have been so poor, being a slave was better than being dead.
You get fed and you have a place to sleep. The next paragraph, the first public street lighting campaign began in 1417 when the mayor of London issued an order to hang lanterns outside homes during the winter months. And that's really impressive. When you get to that 1417, you think, oh my gosh, that was a long time ago.
And that's back when oil and candles were expensive.
Yeah. So it has a long history going back several hundred years. This early initiative to illuminate the streets marked the beginning of organized public street lighting, a concept that would transform cities across the world. A sentence like this reminds us why all human societies generally have some kind of government, because we need somebody to organize this stuff that benefits everybody.
We have these two good words here, campaign and initiative. A campaign is an organized action to accomplish some kind of a goal, and an initiative is an act to improve a situation. So maybe one initiative is part of a larger campaign to finish some larger goal.
You could call it a program. That's an easier word.
All right, let's move on to our next paragraph. Fast forward 4 centuries to the 1800s when Baltimore became the first American city to install gas streetlights on poles.
So where is Baltimore? Baltimore is on the East Coast, the central part of the U.S., and it is a harbor city.
All right, and these gas streetlights were kind of smelly and dirty, if I'm being honest. They're not as good as streetlights, but they were fairly efficient for the time.
And they had to be lit every evening.
This was a significant leap forward in urban lighting, which replaced the more primitive methods of the past.
So now it's becoming a little closer to what we have now.
So we had that word crude earlier. Now we have primitive. These are just basic and rudimentary forms of lighting. In 1878, Paris began using the first electric streetlights, arc lamps.
And here we have a problem. We're going to find out in the next sentence why they were a problem.
However, the harshness of the arc lamps proved to be unbearable to the public.
So there are like 2 contacts here, and then you send an electric current through it, and it jumps over from one contact to the other contact through the air, and it formed a really harsh, bright light.
That's right. Very intense, lots of glare. There was flicker and buzz. People kind of couldn't stand it. They were good for what they were, but like a lot of technologies, they're maybe just a little bit too early. They're a little bit too new and underdeveloped to be spread so widely across a major city like this.
And sometimes too much light is much worse than no light.
Although thousands were installed in Paris and across the U.S., their popularity was short-lived.
Okay, that means that people could not stand it, so they had to figure out a different solution.
They lasted about 50 years.
Was that long?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a long time to have to squint your eyes all the time.
Well, they were like taken in and out. They were replaced as they went. But I suppose probably the final bunch of street lamps were removed only in the I think it was the 20s or 30s.
Good heavens, that's really recent. All right, the invention of the incandescent light bulb in 1879 quickly led to the replacement of the arc lamp. People must have thought, not a minute too soon, can't stand these things.
Okay, for context, an incandescent light bulb, a modern one, has about 2,000 hours for a lifespan.
That's the version that we were using before we stopped using them. They could be made to last a very long time. We'll talk about that another time. So it offered a softer, more pleasant light and became the new standard. What a relief that must have been. The evolution of urban lighting didn't stop there. So that means that although that was already pretty good, there were further improvements ahead. From the 1960s to the early 21st century, sodium lamps became predominant.
So a sodium lamp has a lifespan of 24,000 hours. And so you got about 10 incandescent light bulbs out of one sodium lamp. And sodium lamps, as far as I understand, their initial installation was a little expensive, but long-term they were much cheaper.
But they also had their problems, we'll see in the next sentence. More recently, LED streetlights, with their superior energy efficiency, have replaced many high-pressure sodium lamps. When I see high pressure, I think danger, because if you break them, you're probably going to have a bit of an explosion.
Yeah, sodium is very volatile. You don't want that exploding anywhere. And I think sodium lamps also had like a startup time. Like when they first flicked on, they weren't especially bright. And so you had to start them earlier. I don't know. That wasn't a big deal to me. But anyways, an LED streetlight will last up to 50,000 hours, which is 25 times longer than our old friend, the incandescent light bulb. Although incandescent Christmas lights are the best lights.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. So these also had problems. We found something better. And LED lights are really very bright. So they seem so far to be a pretty good solution. As technology continues to advance, even more efficient streetlights are likely to provide a brighter future for nighttime pedestrians and drivers. This is probably not the end of this story. We'll keep on finding better and better solutions, at least judging from past experience. So below we have a few questions for you. Number 1, what is the main idea of the passage?
And our answer is letter C, to introduce the evolution of street lighting. Number 2, which of the following statements is true?
The answer is letter D. Placing lanterns outside homes signified the start of public street lighting. Number 3, in what order did the following incidents take place?
Okay, so we'll read the answer and then the sentence is back to you. The answer is B, which is C-B-A-D. Letter C is the development of a primitive form of street lighting.
B is the first organized public street lighting campaign.
The third one is A, the invention of the incandescent light bulb.
And the last one is D, the replacement of sodium lamps with LED streetlights. Number 4, which of the following is not mentioned as a reason for the decline of arc lamps?
And our correct answer is A, their widespread installation in some cities.
And that is it for today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.